Hey, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Blaney with the ITSM product marketing team. I'd like to thank you for joining us for another webcast in our Meet the Expert series. Today we have a great topic. I know many of you out of running off of spreadsheets, not knowing what assets you have or are being used, or even how much they're actually costing the business, which is really the ultimate question here. So today, we'll be discussing IT asset management and really looking at best practices, as well as showing you some of the key ITAM solution capabilities around software asset management, license management, financial management, to really help you kind of get a better handle on your assets, what they're costing the business, and really kind of getting things back into control. That's a great kind of cornerstone, if you will, around a great service management practice. So with that, leading us through the session is Jim Stasiak, which we're happy to have. He's our Senior Principal Presales Consultant with a current emphasis on IT asset management. He's got a wealth of experience. He's project managed and implemented our ITAM solutions. And he also brings a wealth of experience around help desk and IT operations, so a great balance and a great perspective of knowledge and experience combined with Jim, and we're happy to have him. So he'll be leading us through the session here in just a minute. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Just want to let you guys know we are recording the session, so if you're familiar with the community, you'll know that after the session we'll try to get the links up so that if you or you and your peers want to take another look at the webcast, you can do that on your own time. So with that, we also want to let you know that, again, this is one in a series of many to come. So we have upcoming series topics that we'll be posting out to the community. So please keep an eye on your community pages. The next one will be around ITSM maturity. Also, we'll be taking questions at the end. So feel free to use the Q&A feature up at the top of the WebEx panels. We'll take those questions. We'll try to answer them as best we can, given the amount of time. So again, feel free to enter your questions, and we'll address those at the end. So with that, I think we should probably get started. I'll pass things over to Jim. Jim, it's all yours.
Okay, Jim, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. You sound great.
All right, great, thank you. All right, welcome everybody, and looking forward to an interesting session today to talk about asset management, my favorite topic. As Jim said, I've been doing this for quite a while. I've been with CA for 8 years, and what's interesting in this position is that I've had the opportunity to talk to literally hundreds of different companies about IT asset management, which gives me a very, I guess, enviable position to see how companies are doing or not doing asset management and the challenges they face. And what is striking to me is that over the years I've observed that asset management is still very much in its infancy, which is kind of surprising to me in that it's been a practice. It's been something we've been doing for many years, but companies are slow to adopt it. And I've always wondered why that was, but it seems to be getting more and more attention lately. And we attribute that primarily to software and software asset management and auditing and all of the implications around using software and using it incorrectly. So there's been a huge focus around software asset management to drive IT asset management. So what I hope to do today is to talk to you a little bit about asset management in the practice and how it fits into the bigger service management picture, where it should be. Historically, asset managers have operated in a bit of a silo, kind of keeping to themselves, but I think we see the biggest benefits when we can open up that world to the greater service management, help desks, CMDBs, catalogs, etc. So without further ado, let's get going, and I've got some slides to do, and then we will, of course, go in and take a look at some of the ways CA's products help facilitate this. So the state of IT asset management today, and again, this is very surprising to me, but inevitably, when we talk to a client, it's not unusual for them to say, we're managing things in spreadsheets. You used to be able to get away with that. Back in the day when things were a lot simpler, licenses, assets, we could do that. But it's not working out so much anymore. We see that, we have poor visibility. We don't know what we have. All of these processes are very manual and prone to error. And then when we talk about software, it's licensing, and are we over or under licensed, and what really are these licenses that we're buying? What do they represent? What do they allow us to do? So there's a lot of changes in the industry now that's really driving this whole asset management story. It's getting more complicated. We have a lot of competition in our businesses, which are causing us to reduce or put pressures on us to reduce costs. Where do we look to reduce costs? To IT. Where does IT look? At the basics. Asset management is kind of one of the areas that if we're going to trim off some fat, that's a good place to start looking. Getting increasingly complicated. Back in the day when I started doing this many, many years ago, hardware assets were very expensive and software licenses were relatively straightforward. So we could get away with, with spreadsheets. We could get away with doing it a little bit more manually. But now when we look at, virtualization, software as a service, subscription services, the devices people are bringing in that we're using in our environment, it really is becoming more challenging to manage all of this. Software audits, always on the forefront of every asset manager's radar screen. When are we going to get audited? It's not if, it's when. When are we going to get audited? And we want to be prepared for that. Historically, customers I've talked to, when they get audited, it's a fire drill. All hands on deck. Everybody pull out the stops. Let's collect data. Let's crunch it. Let's make sure we understand where we're at, and then we're ready for the audit. But that could be many weeks, if not months, of preparation, and it's a huge drain on resources. Proliferation of vendors. Vendor management is really important, both for hardware and software, making sure that we understand who we're buying things from, who we're negotiating contracts with, and making sure that we're not spreading ourselves too thin. Are we using too many vendors? Can we consolidate and get some efficiencies? And then there's always been the rogue or shadow IT. Historically, when IT cannot respond to requests to our customers quickly, they go off and they do it themselves. And this causes a huge risk especially for software, but for hardware asset management as well. So we want to be more responsive to the business so we can eliminate these rogue shadow IT events. And then you can see some of the statistics. Even when we do this fire drill and we collect all this information about our software, there's still a chance that it contains some kind of errors because we don't know exactly how to look in all of the areas that we have to for software licenses and software usage. So it's very much prone to errors. So software, we're going to hear that theme throughout this discussion today, but we can't neglect hardware. And then obviously this is how it can hurt you. I mean, we're going to be buying more things than we need. We're going to be buying things not knowing that when we need them. We're going to buy them spur of the moment. They're going to be unplanned. If we get caught in a HIPAA, SOX, audit situation, it's going to damage our reputation, especially if these things get publicized. And typically, there are organizations that love to publish when someone is caught hugely out of compliance, and that is a huge knock to the reputation. Vendor negotiations. How often when we sit down at the table with a vendor to negotiate a deal, and they're telling us what we have. They're telling us when things are due. It puts the bargaining chips in their side of the table, and we want to eliminate that. We want to be able to go into a vendor negotiation knowing what we have, how much of it we need or don't need, and be able to negotiate that way. And then where is staff getting cut? Everybody I talk to is telling me how their organizations are being reduced or being stretched. And asset management is one of the areas. So we want to make sure we put processes and policies in place so that when we are reducing staff, we at least have some safety nets that we can rely on to help us with our asset management. So, and then an interesting stat here, 85% say that they are over-licensed, which is very true, because what I've observed when I talk to customers is that they buy more licenses because they don't want to get out of compliance. They are very aware of audits, the vendors lurking around the corner to spring on them with that audit request, so they're going to buy software every time they need it, rather than looking at what they have and can they reuse that. The reason they don't do that is because they're not managing it. They don't know what they have. They don't know what they're allowed to use. So the knee-jerk reaction is just keep buying. So there's an expense. There's certainly some cost reductions we can see. So there's things you can do to successfully manage it. You know, there's things we can do. I like to always go back to the 3 Ps of asset management, which is policies, procedures, and processes. We have to know what we do and how we do it. When do we order? When do we request? When do we receive? How do we do these steps? Who does them? And what information can we get from each one of those steps? It is very important to really map that out and then put the processes in place so the people who are doing those steps know what they are responsible to do, and they do it consistently. And then finally, there's policies. There's policies that you have to put in place so that everyone in your organization knows what they are committed to. You know, thou shalt not install software on your computer without the knowledge of IT. And these have to be fairly rigid requirements. You have to put those borders in place, otherwise you get these incidents with rogue, shadow IT functions where people start doing things. If they know that there is a company policy that prohibits them, they will be more likely to think twice before they do it. So there are things that you must do, and these are some of the benefits. We can negotiate, we get transparency, we have better decision making, but we have to put the borders in place so that we're allowed or are able to do that, often with a shorter staff as well. And when we talk to customers, you know, we always talk about this ROI studies and what can I save and where is the savings to be had. And oftentimes when we go into an organization and they're doing it, they're very immature, the savings can be quite significant by putting in some pretty simple steps. So the proverbial low-hanging fruit. If we can start knocking off those and then start maturing the program, we often see some pretty significant savings. There are many sayings when we talk to asset managers that you will hear. One of them is 80% process, 20% tool, to my previous conversation. Policies, procedures, and processes. So there are certainly these things that we will hear time and again that help us model or build out our asset management program. The other thing that we'll often hear is that asset management is a journey. It's not a destination. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but it really is true. When we look at how we start small and we expand and we expand. And over time, you're going to find that as you mature your ITS management program, it's going to gain traction. People are going to be aware of what you are doing, and you're going to be able to expand on that and bring in different devices, different types of assets that you can manage, functions to different parts of the organization, your finance, your procurement, your receiving, your HR. They're all going to be looking at this program, and you will find that it continues to expand. I've never heard of an asset manager say, we're done. That just doesn't happen. You are always finding ways to improve. And when you get to a point when you think you're done, you should go back and you should look at everything that you're doing and do some process improvement, because there's always things you can do better. But we can see some pretty significant savings here. You know, when we're talking 50 to 70% reduction in over-purchasing costs, that's huge. When we're talking about some expensive assets here, software costs, when we can start reusing software, the cost savings is huge, and the risk avoidance is what allows you to sleep better at night. So being able to know that you are compliant, that if you get that audit letter, you can respond to it in a timely fashion with a high degree of confidence. And just a minute, got my mouse goofed up here. So the asset management in the app economy, it's, you know, where we look at, we have hardware asset management, software asset management, and our tool covers both of those arenas for software, license compliance, optimization, understanding what software assets we're using. Hardware asset management, you know, the physical virtual devices, and all the different kinds of devices we have, you know, the end user computing, the data centers, and then all of the other types of equipment, network gear, telecom. Those are the kind of things that are within the domain of asset management. And then you can see there's self-service, vendor management, financial management, et cetera. There's different offshoots that we will see when we start doing asset management that really come into play. And then how can we optimize? How can we make this better? So this is the app economy, and as I said, things have changed so drastically from years ago when we used to be really straightforward with hardware and software. Now we have virtual devices, we have software as a service, we have subscriptions, we have, it's overwhelming. So we definitely need some processes and technology to help us. So we want to get our hands around the financial management as well, and I know that was one of the goals of the intent of this presentation, is to understand how we can get handles on how much we're spending. And with hardware asset management, we'll go in and we'll take a look at this in a minute, as we have categories where we can track costs to things that we buy. And there will be multiple different cost types that we can include, such as purchasing, if we're leasing, if we have to ship, if we have any tax implications, if we have a payment schedule. We really want to understand that as much as detail as we can get to really apply that to our hardware assets, to be able to look at our entire landscape and understand what we have, how much we're paying for it. It never ceases to amaze me when we talk to clients and they say, and we ask, you know, how many devices do you have? How many end user computing? How many data center equipment? And, you know, they'll often reference somebody else and say we have to get that from somebody, or we're not sure. They give us a real rough estimate. And it's really telling that you know, there needs to be some management. I like it when they can give me a good, quick, concise number. That tells me they're at least getting their, you know, they have the concept in place. So really understanding what you have and how much you're paying for it really goes a long way as to, you know, to those first steps of optimizing your asset management. And then software asset management, I think it goes without saying how much we can save here. We buy licenses. You buy a license for a device. That device is in use, and then at some point in time, we're going to retire that device. How many companies can say that they take that license off or that software off of that device and put it back into a pool so that it can be reused? That's one of the common things that I've seen, is that when we buy licenses, they often go away when the device goes away, and then a new license is purchased. So there's a huge savings just by plugging that gap. Harvesting of licenses is something that really comes up a lot. People want to harvest license. They know that they deploy software and people aren't using it, so can we get that software back, and can we reallocate it when it's needed? So there are ways that we can put some processes and some technology to work for us so that we can realize those benefits and use the assets that we have properly. This goes for software and hardware, making sure we understand what we have, what's being used, and what's available. Use it instead of buying new. And then we want to make sure that as we're deploying software that we have adequate licensing. We want to make sure that we don't overuse the software, because that's where we can really get in trouble, and it happens quickly and it's very expensive. So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of our software assets. There is one technology that we have in our tool that I will talk about, is called optimization and simulation. There's maturity levels that you will achieve as you implement your asset management, specifically for software. Just gaining control over what you have and what you're using and manage compliance to that is kind of the first step. That's where you need to get to. But once you're there, to be able to do some simulation and saying, is there a better way? Is there a better way I could optimize or use these licenses that I have? Or can I set up a simulation and see what my licensing impact would be? So these are things that we can look into once we get proficient with software asset management, to see how we can optimize our environment and how can we plan for and simulate our growth needs. So our optimization and simulation module, which is an add-on module to our CA-SAM product, allows you to do that. We have an optimization module that allows you to look at your current estate and have it recommend, CA-SAM will recommend to you the most efficient way to license this environment. And then you can look at that same environment with your existing licenses, and it will tell you how best to leverage those licenses. So it's a very neat technology that we're pretty excited about, and it really kind of takes you to that next level of not getting compliant, and then how can I improve on that position. And then IT asset managers have, for the most part, and I'm guilty of this as well, is operated in a silo. Heads down, I'm just tracking my hardware and my software assets. I want to make sure that I know where everything is. I'm going to keep a keen eye on software or software compliance. But when we open this up to the IT community, to the rest of my service management and my end users, we're really getting into that, the center of excellence, if you will, where our end users are really seeing the benefit of IT. They're able to interact with IT. And IT in itself can leverage these tools to their maximum capability. Being able to look at assets when we open an incident, to be able to look at the life cycle of an asset when we're doing a change on a business service, to expose what we have available to our end users for requests. This is where we really start to see the kind of the lights go on and things just really starting to realize the benefits. So again, we want to get our heads out of the heads down managing assets and understand where we can apply this technology to the greater good. So in summary, before we move on, we'll take a look at some of these examples of things I've been talking about. Our integrated solution. It's with our IT asset management, part of our service management, we're tied into that MDB, that central database, where we can start sharing this information from process automation, discovery, server automation, service desk. This is all integrated. We have full hardware and software asset management, lifecycle contract, financial vendor management, some of the cool things we can do in our hardware asset management portion, and then our software asset management tool. So we're going to go take a look at some of these things, and together, hopefully it will enlighten you into some of the possibilities and hopefully give you some good ideas of things you can do or places you can take this whole program. So I'm going to start out a little bit different than I usually do a demo. And again, I have about a half hour left here, so we're going to go into several different areas. But I want to at least show you from kind of an outside asset management role, how people can interact or benefit from asset management. So I'm going to go into our unified self-service, and I don't know if you've had a chance to participate or watch. We did a community webcast on the unified self-service a few weeks ago, I guess it was. We have it recorded. I would highly encourage you to take a look at that, because this is kind of the end user's portal into IT. Their ability to interact with IT and to really request, ask, talk to IT. With that theme of we want to make ourselves, IT, more open to the community. We want to make sure that they can interact with us, understand what we're doing, transparency, and be able to feel comfortable that when they ask for something or when they report something that they're going to get some action on it. So this self-service end user portal, from an asset management perspective now, logging on as an end user, I have some things I can do. And one of the things that's kind of neat is this show my resources. So I've logged on as this individual, Jackie Brown, and Jackie can go in and look at the resources that have been allocated to her, which is very nice because from an end user, I want to know what I'm responsible for. Was a few years back that I had a replacement laptop shipped to me and I neglected to send my old one back. So had I had this technology, I would have been able to see that, hey, I'm getting charged for, or IT thinks that or knows that I still have 2 assets. So it gives that end user that power to understand what it is that they are being, what's been allocated to them. And then if we're doing any sort of charge back or show back, what costs would I be incurring to my business unit? And it would behoove me then to relinquish assets that I don't need if I can see what I'm being charged for. This is something that, you know, is kind of an interesting concept for some organizations. People haven't had this ability. And then from this, I can report issues. So I can go in and I can report an issue or open a service desk ticket for any one of these incidents. It's a very nice way to streamline my interaction with IT. The other thing that where we see asset management kind of coming into play here is when I request a service. This is tied into our service catalog, and this is where a user can come in and ask for things. They can, and this is a configurable panel. We can put things on here, take things off of it as meets our business needs. But from here, I can request a hardware asset. I can request software. I can ask for things. This is essentially a front end to my asset management system in a sense, in that this shows me what is available to an end user. They can request it. And then through a workflow process, once they put that request in, it can be sent down for approvals, and then it can be sent to our asset manager to check availability. So now we can start reusing assets to fulfill a request, and that's the goal. And we'll take a look at how we might facilitate that from an asset manager's perspective. But so we have this end user portal, unified self-service. It's an awesome tool for those end users to interact with IT. So once we've done that, now so that's our front end. So now we're going to go back into our heads down asset management role, and we're going to take a look at how we might interact or what our hardware asset management would look like. I'm logging in here as an administrator, something that I don't encourage people to do, but I do it for demonstration sake so that I don't get hung up on any security. We have very robust security on here. You can define roles and responsibilities, and then when users assigned to those roles log in, they get a very defined view into our tools. So to eliminate that, I log on as an administrator so I can see and do everything, but understand that all of the things that I'm doing can be limited based on these roles, these security roles. And then once you're logged in as a role, and if you're given permission into one system, it kind of permeates to the other portions of service management. So unified self-service, the things that I log on and can't see would be, if I was given permission into this repository, would have similar restrictions or permissions. So this is our hardware asset management repository. This is where we log or record all things hardware. We are focused on IT assets primarily, but the system is not exclusive to IT. We can configure it. We can set it up to track things that aren't traditionally IT-type assets. But for the sake of this demo, we're going to focus on IT assets, but keep that in mind. And this is one of the areas where you might tend to grow and expand your program as people start understanding what's available and how things work. You might be getting some requests of maybe, you know, your facilities department asking if you can help them start tracking desks or other type of, you know, office equipment, which you certainly can. But that would be a scope you would want to certainly define and plan for. So for now, we're going to focus on IT-type assets. And what I want to do is I'm going to go over and look at models. Now, we can think of models from a hardware asset management as perhaps those things we might have advertised in our catalog. In Unified Self-Service, when we went into the catalog, we had a list of things that we could ask for. We could ask for a laptop. We could ask for a desktop or a mobile device. So these would then be kind of the models that the asset manager would be concerned about, or those things may be a little bit more specific than what we advertise, but generally the same thing. So if I was going to look for a model name and I want to look for a latitude, and I can do some wildcards here and show me all the different latitudes that I have, which would be Dell assets, obviously our latitudes, E6410. The model record will give me some generic details about that hardware asset. And I can see parts and pricing, which would tell me, you know, who I would get this from and how much I would pay for it, and what that manufacturer part number is, if that was the manufacturer's part number. And then I can also put some date parameters on this, or the dates that I would want to be using this asset or purchase this asset. Oftentimes we hear, you know, what's in the channel. A vendor's going to be publishing or creating these E6410s for a period of time, and then they're going to stop and they're going to move on to the next model. We want to be aware of that. We could use these begin and end dates to reflect that, or we could use them for some other internal designators that we might want to set up. Maybe this is the begin and end date of our use of this type of device. When does it need to be refreshed? We might be able to use the dates for that. So I have this model. I can see it's an 6410, some generic information about it. But now I want to see what assets, what have I purchased based on this model. And I can click on this relationship and go over and see that there are a series of assets that were based on this hardware model. In this case, we have 4 of them. Typically, in a production system, you may have hundreds. But for our little demo environment, we've kind of limited it. Once we look on one of these specific assets, and you'll notice that we moved from the model to the asset tab, now we're looking at a specific hardware record. This is a unique asset. It's got a serial number, asset tag, barcode, whatever we designate internally to make it unique. We can see the department it's allocated to, the cost center, the rec and purchase order. How did this asset come in? How do we, you know, if we can start now looking at, per a purchase order, all of the devices that were purchased under a specific purchase order. We can see who it's allocated to and their location. And we can see that it's active. We know that this asset is in use. And we can see that it's assigned to Peter Jackson. Some of the other things we can associate with it is our costs. So we can see what costs have been allocated to it. And we can start to see, as we look at all these cost records across all of our assets, we can start understanding our TCO, total cost of ownership. And we can do it across our entire asset base, but then we can start looking at certain segments. What did I spend on latitudes? What did I spend on mobile devices? What did I spend on we can start sectioning it to understand these different categories. I can see it's a leased asset based on the cost type, and I can see how much I'm paying for it. We can create notes against this specific asset. This is just a general note that a technician probably put in here, users having a problem with the asset. Not very informative, but if I was doing this consistently, I might be able to kind of make some deductions. If I see a lot of notes in here of a certain category or certain type, that might indicate something about this asset that would be of interest. We can do model configurations. We often hear of bundles. I want to create a bundle. In this case, I've created a bundle of a laptop and then a docking station and a monitor. So now I further drill into ownership details. If I had to recoup this asset from this individual, I'd know I'd have some additional things I should collect from them that go with this laptop. And then legal documents. But actually, before we go to that, service desk tickets. So we've got this integration with our service desk, and we can see that there was an incident. In this case, it was canceled, and it's probably fictitious. But as this asset was associated to help desk tickets, I can see that on this system. I can see the tickets open per asset. We often talk about worst actors. What are my worst actors? Maybe a Dell Latitude E6410, I'm seeing an extraordinary number of incidents against. I may want to take action on that. Either talk to the vendor, talk to my manufacturer, whatever it is, but I'd want to understand why that particular model was giving me trouble. So we can look at worst actors. We can also look at worst actors of the people who are calling in the most times for incidents and kind of work it the other way. But then the legal documents. So this is a leased asset. We saw that cost record was a leased asset. So we know that there must be a contract over it. And this is the other part of ITAM, of ATM, was our contracts. So managing contracts as they govern our IT assets. And when we're talking about contracts, we're talking about, in this case, a lease agreement, maintenance, warranties, service agreements, these things that I negotiate with vendors on things that they are going to provide for me, services. And I want to manage those. This is one of the areas that we see people taking advantage of fairly quickly, just putting their contracts in a central repository. They're IT contracts. Typically, they have a contract management system that manages the contracts for the entire organization. We like to extract those IT contracts out, give our asset manager visibility into them, and allow them to manage their program based on these contracts. They may then be able to give influence or feedback to our contract managers on how best to negotiate. We can see we have a contract here. It's a lease based on a lease template. We have a start and an end date. We know what it is, with who, what vendor. We know who's been involved, or we should be able to record this. We have some blanks here, but who internally, who externally was involved in this contract. What status is this contract in right now? And further, is there any amendments? Have we made changes to the conditions of this? How many assets, and we can look at the specific assets that are assigned to this lease agreement, and then any specific terms and conditions that we might have, any T's and C's that we need to be aware of. So now we have this visibility into a contract, and when it starts, when it ends, and what all is impacted. Now I can start managing much more efficiently. One of the things that the system provides is a technology called events and notifications, where based on that termination date, I can start taking actions prior to that, sending out notifications, creating help desk tickets, letting people know this date is approaching, get in front of the contract, negotiate from a position of power to my vendors that how I want to handle the contracts going forward. So there's a lot of capability here. It just needs to be implemented. We just need to put our processes, policies, and procedures into place put a repository behind it, and we're well on our way to getting us to that center of excellence with IT. So last but not least, software asset management. This is, as I said, this is where companies are really focusing their efforts. It's often hard when we talk to clients to pull back the reins and say, well, how are you doing with your hardware? We need to get the hardware at least in some semblance of order before we can really move on to do effective software asset management. We can't just jump in here. We need to at least start the hardware program, getting that somewhat stable. But this is where we want to get to, probably sooner than later, because having this in place and implemented allows the software asset managers and the VPs and the C-level executives to sleep a little better at night because they have a better confidence in their overall compliance. The view that we would like to get to ultimately is this compliance position. So stepping back for a minute, what are we trying to do here? We have software licenses that we're buying. We buy these things that allow us to use some software. The license terms and what it allows us to do, known as the product use rights, will be different from virtually every manufacturer to every product within their product line. We might have different product use rights that are granted to us when we buy this software. But we're buying this. We're buying this right to use software. Then we go out and we install software on devices. And we hopefully will install the right software that is allowed by that license we've purchased. So that is the goal, is that keeps us in compliance. We buy and we install, and then we want to be compliant. We don't want to buy more than we're installing, and we certainly don't want to install more than we're buying. Sounds very simple on the face of it when we talk to it like that. But what makes it extremely difficult, and perhaps why companies avoid doing it or resist doing it, they know they need to, is because it is so hard. When you look at licenses, as I said, the product use rights, the different products we can buy and how they're listed and how they're recorded and trying to understand it is challenging. I mean, you have to have a software asset manager has to be heads down understanding that part of the business. And then you go and you look at usage. Typically, this is through some sort of automatic discovery. We can go out and poll our environment to understand what's out there. But when we do that, we tend to get a mountain of data. And this mountain of data is not always easy to understand. Oftentimes, it's darn near impossible when we just look at it. So we've got a mountain of information that's all over the place, and we've got all of these licenses that we don't really understand how we're allowed to use them, and we're going to try to match this up into some sort of compliance. So this is the view that we would strive, that we would love to get to, which in this view is showing me all of the things that I have purchased in this first column under product name. These are things that I've purchased and or I'm using. So I've discovered it or I've purchased it. Now we've taken all of the confusion out. When we've got to this step, we've taken all of the confusion out of it, and we're presenting it in a very concise, readable, understandable format. What have I purchased and what am I using? We further understand these license metrics. One of the software terms that we often hear is the metrics. What is this? How do we count? How do we use this license? The next column is effective license, meaning what did I purchase? What licenses do I own? And I can see then, going down that column, licenses that I've purchased. Effective demand then being what am I using? So we've understood the licenses and really normalized that data to show exactly what you've purchased. And then we take your demand, the mountain of information, and we do product recognition and a demand calculation to show exactly what you're using. And then the single balance should just be the total of those two columns, which is oftentimes incorrect, which is oftentimes when someone tries to do this manually, these are the numbers they come up with. This shows them what they perceive as their compliance position. there are, with our product use rights, optimization capabilities built into those product use rights that we need to take advantage of. Downgrade rights, the ability to use software on multiple machines, the ability to use software on a dev machine based on a license we might have from a production, the ability to install multiple copies on one device. These are just some examples of things that the product use rights would allow us to do. When this tool, when CASAM calculates compliance, it takes those product use rights into consideration and will present them and show them in this view, showing us our overall balance based on applying any product use rights that are available to us, show us where our compliance position truly is. So then if we go on confidence or we trust that the system is telling us the truth, then we can see that any place where we have a negative number and a red down arrow, as our legend shows us we're out of compliance. We're using something without a license. And then conversely, if we have a green sideways arrow, it means that we've got exactly the right amount. And then if we have positive numbers with a yellow up arrow, it shows us that we are overextended. We've bought more licenses. This is the screen that the software asset manager would manage to understand his compliance position, fix those down arrows first and foremost, whether we do uninstall software or purchase licenses. We have to fix those, and then we have to make sure that we don't spend more than we're using. So this is all great, and really the devil's in the details on all of this. So how did we get there? This could be a discussion that would take perhaps hours to really go into, to delve into the intricacies of how this tool works. But I will give you a brief kind of recap or overview. We process on the right-hand side of this, we call this the A model because it looks like an A. On the right-hand side where it says licenses, this is where we record the things that we purchase. Using what we call SKU-based lookups or manufacturer part numbers of those licenses, we can go into this master catalog of the CASAM tool to determine what that product number allows us to use. It gives us our product, our version, our edition, and our product use rights. It's kind of the Reader's Digest view, and it's actually the whole view, but it presents us a very simplistic view of what we're allowed to do with that license. And at the same time, it's going to give us a standard naming convention. So this now takes the mystery out of those licenses. It lets me know exactly based on that part number, what did I buy and how am I allowed to use it. And I have to tell the tool how many I bought, and then it will post those in effective license. It pools those licenses together. So then we have our effective license pool, which is what we've purchased and how we're allowed to use it. And that one effective license column from the compliance view. Effective demand, this is, which is over on the left-hand side, we call that software of the A model leg, where we integrate or consume discovery data. Discovery data will come in many forms, in many different ways. It's typically not just one data feed because we want to understand everything that we are using. So we may look at discovery tools, we may look at exports from Active Directory, we may look at our virtualized environment. There's a lot of data that will come in on the left-hand side. What we generally do with that data is we do a product recognition. So it comes in very raw formats. We have recognition rules in this master catalog. The recognition rules will show us now a normalized standardized name, product, version, edition, along with the license metric of that identified product. And then the next step is to calculate how much of it we're using. It allows us to go into the data center environments to understand our physical virtual clusters, our hardware composition, data center, typically the more complex license metrics, apply all of that information into feed it into a knowledge base, so to speak, to give us our overall effective demand. How much of this software are we actually using? Once we have those two levels achieved, effective demand and effective license, the tool will do a compliance calculation. It'll actually run a job to compare what I'm using and what I've purchased. Now, I've mentioned several times this master catalog in the middle. That's really a very important component of this tool. It is a central repository of information that we will draw on to determine products that we purchased, what we're using, and how much of it we're using. A lot of that information comes out of this master catalog. The master catalog is part of CA SAM. CA will supply or do updates to this master catalog. It's populated with a lot of information, and then it's updated on a monthly basis. It isn't an all-inclusive, worldwide, every software in the world encompassed type of catalog. We look at the major manufacturers, the major products within those manufacturers' lines, and that's what we cover in our base master catalog. Customers may then extend it. They then can put in things that's unique, specific to their environment that may not be in that master catalog, and then the base master catalog with the extended master catalog go hand in hand to deliver that overall compliance position. So, as you can see, I mean, it's a very inclusive tool. The hardware piece, the software piece, delivering this goal of asset management, understanding what I have, how much I'm using, how much I've paid for it, opening that up to the rest of IT, to show that to internal to my service management type functions, help desk, incident, problem, change, request, approval portal, contract management, integration with our other non-IT, traditional IT organizations such as purchasing, procurement, finance, HR, all this information can be exposed or available to them to read from and contribute to. And that's where it gets us to the center of excellence, where we can really start seeing some efficiencies, some improvements, and some cost savings. So I'm 5 minutes from the top of the hour. I guess I can stop here, and if there are any questions in the queue, otherwise we can see what the next steps are. Jim, do we have anything come in?
Jim, I was going to say, yeah, we're just going to pause here for just a second, but if anyone does have questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature. The one question that I had maybe for the group listening is, you've mentioned that, a lot of organizations haven't had either the maturity and or the kind of the wherewithal to really kind of move forward, with asset management. But could you maybe give us your, hey, this is the best place to start, or your kind of, your experience in terms of leading a new organization down this path of, where to start, or maybe where to look to get more information, or to kind of get a better idea of how to really kind of take hold and implement this in their practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously it's going to vary with each organization, but we always go in and we say, where's your biggest pain? Where do you feel like you need to start? Invariably they're going to say software, Microsoft, Adobe, that's going to be where they want to start on. And that's fine, but again, what we want to try to do then is pull back the reins, and we'll say, okay, how are you doing on hardware? We'll want to assess how they're doing with their hardware asset management to see what they have in place. We always talk the 3 Ps. Do you have processes and procedures in place? How do you request? How do you approve? So maybe we take servers, and we start with servers on the hardware. That's typically the easiest because they're fairly static, and there's not a lot of movement, and we can do those fairly quickly. So we do servers, and then we start looking at our physical virtual cluster and make sure we get that all understood and get that under management, and then move into server-type software. And maybe we go vendor by vendor within the software space. So maybe we do servers, Microsoft. And start small. We always say to start small, get proficient, and then get bigger. So where do we start? Typically, where do you have the biggest pain? Or we take a segment, such as data center, end user computing, telecom, and grow it that way. And then a lot of times what we see is when we get some of those processes in place, we can boilerplate that and move it on to something else. So the way we manage servers should not be all that different from the way we manage our end user computing devices, other than they're probably a lot more active and there's other people involved in it, but we can reuse a lot of the same systems that we've already set up. So again, you start, and I think the hardest thing is just starting, and then you'll find that you can grow and expand fairly quickly once you get proficient with the basics. And CA Services, we have some awesome people that have done this many times that can come in and talk with you, help you start mapping processes and determining how to get this program started. I think the hardest thing is just to start.
Right. Excellent. Okay, there was another question that came in terms of the technology itself, in terms of discovery. You know, what technology are we using? You can speak to that in terms of really going out and discovering those software titles. Is that coming from our client automation tool? Maybe you can kind of elaborate on that.
Yes, and I will say that the reliability of the information in the SAM tool that I just showed really is dependent on how good our discovery data is. So yeah, you want to keep a keen eye on that. You want to make sure you have some confidence in that information. That's telling you what you're using. You want to make sure that you believe that information. So spot audits are always a good thing to do there. But we do integrate with our IT client automation. Actually, we have its little brother, I call it, is IT Inventory Manager, which is an agent-based device or an agent-based technology that periodically wakes up on a desktop, laptop server and will inventory what's on it. It'll collect its hardware and software information, and that is what we feed into CA SAM. Now, we also can integrate with many other discovery tools, and as I mentioned, there will be many discovery sources in a typical implementation. Microsoft SCCM, as we see that all the time, Altiris, HP, BMC, they all have some discovery tools out there that provide information that is perfectly usable in CA SAM. And it's typically an agent-based, though some technology now is non-agent-based. The reliability of that data is still a little suspect in my mind, but we can integrate, or we will use whatever is presented to us, given that you have confidence in its reliability and that it provides the information that CA SAM requires.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour, Jim. You've taken us all the way to the top, which is fantastic. And I think there was a lot of great information. You know, if this is something new, or this is something that, you know, from your company standpoint, you're looking at for the first time, or just really haven't been able to move and advance this, hopefully this has been helpful. And as Jim mentioned, you know, whether it's, you know, contacting us through your account reps or through services, you know, I highly recommend that you reach out to get, you know, the next level of detail to help you kind of move forward with your, you know, IT asset management practice. So with that, I would like to say thanks, Jim. Fantastic. Any last words there?
Nope. Other than you got to get started, and I think it's never too early, it's never too late, but there's definitely some advantages to doing it.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, listen, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. As I mentioned at the beginning, obviously we're going to continue this series once a month with a new topic, and next month's topic is ITSM maturity, which I'm sure everyone is kind of interested in. And especially with this IT asset management topic, these kind of dovetail together, and we'll shed some light on that and how you can kind of move forward and advance your maturity within your organization. So look forward to that. Again, the recording will be posted. If peers didn't have an opportunity to join us today, feel free to let them know that it will be posted. and hopefully they can take a look at it on their own time. So with that, I'd like to thank Jim, Chris, thank you, and we'll be talking to you soon next month. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.